Welcome back with today a recording straight away with audio. So let's focus on the following. Reality capture is now starting to become really interesting because we're no longer just scanning the environments, we're now starting to interact with them. In the previous video, we looked specifically at different ways of capturing environments. And eventually, all that spatial data needs to live somewhere. So these environments can be experimented with in the recently free version of the Lixel Cyber Color Studio. It allows you to work and edit Gaussian splat data in a much more immersive way. So you can navigate the environment, review the captured space, isolate geometry, and begin interacting with reality capture spatially instead of purely technologically, as you would with the hardware scanner. And honestly, this is where for me this all starts to feel less like documentation. It's now more like spatial computing and spatial awareness. What's exciting is how quickly our workflows here will evolve. Different capture tools can feed this data into environments like what we see here in front of us, allowing our teams to revisit these spaces digitally really easily and quickly. And so for architecture, retail, and event environments, we can change things up pretty dramatically. We can start refining the environment, clean unwanted geometry, isolate important areas, and remove noise from the capture. This becomes incredibly valuable when working on a large experiential or retail space where the context of the environment really matters. So for retail environments like Incredible Connection, it becomes useful to understand the flow, the visibility, the adjacencies, and the customer experience before we physically revisit the site. Let's dive in for a moment. We're in the LCC environment, and as you can see here, we're in a mall. We've got the Incredible Connection store in front of us, and then we can turn on some simple settings. We've got all the modification buttons here on our left, and as we go into the space, we can quite easily isolate what we need to see in the store. Now, the important thing I did before I started this video was I already cut out some spaces, as you can see here, further on here on the right, and slightly further back against the back of the wall. And by cutting these spaces out, we can now insert objects into those specific locations to then test our new ideas, our new design. Now, before we do that, let me give you a short overview of some other features that are available. So one thing that I find really handy is Color Studio has a Z clipping tool. So I click on the top right and I can filter the height. And as I slide this bar down, you can see that it starts to decrease the scan. So all the way to the floor plan itself, the first level of table displays, then the wall base, and then the ceiling back. So let's leave the ceiling off for a moment and stop the Z clipping just ahead of the header displays here on the walls. And now we can see quite easily from the top of our environment what this space looks like. And so there we have the front section, the back right, and that wall base zone. And here we want to insert our new designs. Now, if you had seen yesterday's video and you were curious to understand how this data was captured, I'm going to show you under settings, the scanning path. So let me turn that on. And then you can see this green line indicating the path that I walked to scan this. So you can see I've got quite a few overlapping paths. I circle back. I try to connect the paths and make sure that my path, the way that I walk, overlaps. And that way, at the different heights, you can see it captures the data in the best way. And we get a high level of detail against ceiling, a waist height level of detail, and a kneecap height level of detail. And all those three bring that photogrammetry geometry together. So let's stay here on this front right corner. Let's turn under settings, the scanning path back off. And then what I want to do is I want to quickly walk out of this area and switch to SketchUp. And I'm going to show you this really simple display. So this is a display that has on the one side Nintendo products and on the other side DJI drone products. And so let's say that a question from a client is to see how this unit, this display table, would look if it was placed in the Incredible Connection store. So we can export out of SketchUp Pro files in different formats and then go into LCC Studio and then import whichever of these formats we prefer. So most easily would be FBX, GLB, or OBJ. And having then imported that file, I will simply turn that product table back on. And now we can see what that file looks like, what that design looks like in the current space. And so we can see that this table is a little bit smaller than all the other tables that are visible here in the store as it is. But we can get a good sense of the circulation. We can get a good sense of how the header graphic is working in relation to the other environments that we see around us. We can see that the circulation around the table is sufficient. And if we want to, we can select the product table object. We can make sure that we are using the move tool. And then we can simply move this table around. We can use the scale tool to increase its size if required. And we can obviously use a rotation tool to rotate the table, let's say 180 degrees or 90 degrees to create a slightly different configuration. And now this way we can very easily, using our preferred SketchUp environment, design and draw something out and then follow it up by inserting it into our Gaussian Splat, our LCC Studio. So I think we are starting to move towards workflows where capturing environments becomes the standard starting point for our designs, instead of rebuilding everything manually from scratch. With tools like LCC Studio, are helping making that shift possible. In the next video, I want to start looking at optimization, workflow, scale, and where these technologies might realistically fit into everyday design practices. I hope this video has been informative. Please like, subscribe, and take a look at our other playlist videos. And more than that, I wish you have a great day.